Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are opening up a file that, if you believe our author, the system administrators have been trying to, well, delete for about a century.
That's a good way to put it.
We're talking about history,
Yeah.
but not the clean, polished version you get in a high school textbook. We're talking about history as a literal battlefield.
It's such a great way to frame it. I mean, we usually think of borders being drawn by armies, right? By tanks and treaties.
Right.
But there's this deeper layer of conflict that happens in the archives, in census data, and, in the stories nations tell themselves to justify why they even exist. It's the battle for the narrative.
And usually, the people fighting that battle are academics.
Yeah.
Professors with tenure, elbow patches, the whole deal. But today, we're looking at someone totally different.
Completely different.
Our focus is on a man named Risto Stefov. He's not a career historian. He spent his life as a computer engineer, a tech guy who decided to hack the history of the Balkans.
That is exactly right. We're looking at a stack of his work today, primarily his biography and his very provocatively titled book, The Little Book of Big Greek Lies.
That's not a subtle title.
No, it is not. And to understand Stefov, you really have to lean into that engineering background. He approaches history like a coder approaches a piece of software. He thinks the official history of Greece and Macedonia is full of bugs, glitches, and malicious code, and he's trying to rewrite the whole program.
Which is a massive undertaking for a guy who spent his 9 to 5 building computer systems. But before we get into the bugs he claims to have found, we need to orient ourselves.
Yeah.
The Balkans is a complicated neighborhood. Who is Risto Stefov, and where does he actually come from?
So Stefov was born Chris Stefov in 1953. He's from a village called Oshkima. And the geography here is absolutely crucial because it's the root of the whole conflict. Oshkima is in the Laren region. If you look at a map today, that is in northern Greece.
Okay, so legally, he's born in Greece.
Legally, yes. But ethnically and culturally, he identifies as Macedonian. And this is the core tension. He's part of a minority population in northern Greece that, according to him, has been systematically pressured to stop being Macedonian.
And he didn't stay there.
He didn't stay long. In 1966, at age 13, his family immigrated to Canada.
Which was a pretty common story back then, right?
Wow.
The old world was unstable, so you pack up and head for Toronto or Melbourne or somewhere like that.
A massive wave of migration, yes. And this is such a pivotal moment for him. He leaves the immediate pressure of the Greek state and lands in Toronto. He assimilates, learns English, he studies engineering, and has a very successful career in the computer industry. He's, living the immigrant dream.
So he's not sitting in a library dusting off old scrolls. He's out there in the corporate world.
Right. But then he retires. And most people, when they retire, they, take up golf or gardening? Stefov decides to conduct a root cause analysis of his own identity.
I like that, a root cause analysis.
He becomes the resident historian, you could say, for the Canadian Macedonian Historical Society. He realizes that there is this huge disconnect. You have this younger generation of the Macedonian diaspora kids born in Canada, Australia, who know they are Macedonian, but they can't read the language, and the only history books available in English. Well, they tell the Greek side of the story.
So if you're a Macedonian kid in Toronto wanting to know about your grandfather's village, and you go to the library, you're reading a book that says your grandfather was actually Greek.
Precisely. Or that he was a Slavophone Greek, a Greek who just happened to speak a syllabic language. Stefov saw this as a data integrity error, to keep with our metaphor. He wanted to provide an accessible English language resource that told the story from the Macedonian perspective. He's translating the identity for the next generation.
Let's get into the code he's trying to debug.
Yeah.
His book, The Little Book of Big Greek Lies. That title?
Oh.
Well, it's not subtle. He's not looking for a nuanced academic debate. He's looking for a fight.
He is.
What is the central thesis here?
His central thesis is that modern Greek identity is a construct. He argues that what we think of today as Greece, the nation-state, isn't this ancient, unbroken line going back to Socrates and Plato. He claims it was manufactured in the 19th century by the Western great powers.
Manufactured by who? Britain and France.
Britain, France, Russia. Stefov argues that these powers needed a geopolitical foothold in the Balkans as the Ottoman Empire was collapsing. They loved the idea of ancient Greece, the philosophy, the democracy.
A romantic ideal of it?
Exactly. So according to Stefov, they essentially engineered a modern state and projected that ancient fantasy onto the people who were living there.
Wait, so he say the people living in, say, Athens or Sparta in the 1800s weren't actually the descendants of the ancients?
That is exactly what he's arguing. He claims the region was a massive melting pot. Albanians, Vlachs, Slavs, Turks. He argues that the great powers in the new Greek state had to Hellenize these people. They had to teach them to be Greek, teach them the language, and convince them they were the heirs to Pericles.
That sounds like it sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Mm.
Nations are built on stories, sure, but to say the whole thing is a fabrication.
Well, Stefov would say, look at the source code. Look at the demographics of Athens in the 1830s. He cites sources claiming it was heavily Albanian-speaking. His argument is that the Greek identity was a software patch installed over a very diverse hardware. And the problem for him is that this patch required deleting the existing files, specifically the Macedonian ones.
Okay, I see where the conflict lies. If Greece is this pure ancient nation, then Macedonians can't exist as a separate people. So let's look at the specific bugs he points out. The first one has to be the big one, Alexander the Great.
The biggest one. The standard narrative, the one in almost every textbook, is that ancient Macedonia was a Greek kingdom. Philip II, Alexander. They are Greek heroes. Stefov challenges this head-on. He argues that in the ancient world, Greeks and Macedonians were two totally distinct ethnic groups.
But hold on. I have to push back here. Alexander spread the Greek language. Aristotle was his tutor. If they weren't Greek, why were they acting so well Greek?
And that's the billion-dollar question. Stefov argues that the Macedonian court, the royals, they adopted Greek culture because it was the prestige culture of the time. It's like how the Russian aristocracy spoke French in the 18th century.
Okay, I get that.
Catherine the Great spoke French, but that didn't make the Russian peasantry French.
Yeah.
Stefov points to ancient sources where Greek city-states call the Macedonians barbarians.
And barbarian in that context meant not us, right? Not Greek.
Exactly. It meant non-Greek speaker. Stefov uses this to drive a wedge between the two. He says, look, they didn't see us as kin then, so why are they claiming us as kin now? He argues it's a modern territorial claim disguised as history. If Alexander is Greek, then the land he was born in belongs to Greece. If he's not, that claim weakens a lot.
Okay, let's move to another bug he identifies. And this one seems to get people really heated in the comments sections online. The Slavic label. Most historians agree that the people in the Republic of North Macedonia today are Slavs who arrived in the 6th or 7th century. Why does Stefov reject that?
This is a crucial piece of his indigenous argument. The mainstream academic view is the migration theory. The ancient Macedonians die out or move, and then centuries later, Slavic tribes cross the Danube and settle the area. Therefore, modern Macedonians are newcomers with no blood connection to Alexander.
Which seems plausible on the surface. People move, empires rise and fall.
Stefov says, show me the mass graves. He argues that there's no evidence of the indigenous population just disappearing. His theory is that when the Slavs arrived, they didn't replace the locals, they merged with them. He argues for continuity. He says the modern Macedonian people carry the blood of the ancients, even if their language changed over time.
So for him, calling Macedonians Slavs is a way of saying you don't belong here.
Exactly. He views the word Slav as a geopolitical weapon used to delegitimize their claim to the land. If you're a Slav, you're a guest. If you're indigenous, you're the owner. He's trying to debug the timeline to prove that the Macedonian people never left.
It's interesting how he uses that engineering mindset. If the input, the Slavic migration, doesn't match the output, the current population, there must be a flaw in the process. But he doesn't just stop at ancient history. He gets into the 20th century, and this is where the story gets really dark.
Very dark.
We need to talk about the 1920s.
This is arguably the most significant part of his work regarding modern demographics, the population exchange of 1923.
I know this was a result of the war between Greece and Turkey, but explain the scale of this. How does just moving people around change history?
It was massive. We're talking about a treaty-mandated swap based entirely on religion. Muslims living in Greece were sent to Turkey. Christians living in Turkey, mostly in Asia Minor, were sent to Greece. We are talking about over 1 million people flooding into the Greek state almost overnight.
1 million people in the 1920s is a staggering number.
It is. And Stefov argues that the Greek government didn't just settle these refugees randomly. He claims they used a specific algorithm, to keep with our theme. They settled the vast majority of these refugees in Aegean Macedonia, the northern part of the country where the ethnic Macedonians lived.
So demographic engineering.
That's his term for it. He argues the goal was to dilute the ethnic Macedonian majority. Before 1923, he claims Macedonians were the clear majority in the north. After you dump hundreds of thousands of new Greeks into the region, suddenly the census data changes. The Macedonians become a minority in their own homes.
And that solidifies the Greek claim to the land. Look, everyone here is Greek now.
Exactly. Stefov views this as the moment the software patch was fully installed. The indigenous character of the region was overwhelmed by a new population that was loyal to the Greek state. And for the locals who were already there, life became very, very difficult.
This brings us to the most emotional part of the dossier we reviewed, the Dekabagalchi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Dekabagalchi, the refugee children. This is a topic that can bring grown men to tears in this community. This happened later during the Greek Civil War in the late 1940s.
Right, the communists versus the rightists.
Yes. And the war was brutal, and it was fought heavily in the north. To protect the children, the communist partisans evacuated roughly 28 to 30,000 children across the border into Eastern Europe, places like Poland, Romania, Hungary.
They were sent away for safety.
For safety. But here is the kicker. After the war ended, the right-wing government won. They passed laws allowing refugees to return and reclaim their citizenship and property, but with a very specific clause. You could only return if you were Greek by genus, meaning Greek by race or birth.
Wait, that's the actual legal language. Greek by genus.
Yes. Stefov highlights this legislation repeatedly. It effectively meant that if you were an ethnic Macedonian child who was sent away, you were barred from coming home. You were stripped of your citizenship, your family's land was confiscated and often given to people loyal to the new regime.
So you have thousands of kids growing up in exile, knowing they have a home they can't go back to because they aren't the right kind of citizen.
And that is the trauma that drives Stefov. He's not just arguing about Alexander the Great's DNA for fun. He's arguing that there was a systematic, legal effort to physically and bureaucratically remove his people from the map.
And speaking of maps, that leads to another huge part of his work, the names. He spent a lot of time cataloging toponyms.
He does. He treats it like a database restoration project. He lists village names. For example, he'll show a village that was called Oshima for centuries, and then he'll document how in the 1920s it was officially renamed to Trigonon.
It's a rebranding.
It's total erasure. Stefov argues that by changing the names of the villages, the rivers, the mountains from Macedonian to Greek, the state was rewriting the interface of the land. If you look at a map today, it looks Greek. Stefov wants to show the underlying code, the original names that he says prove who was there first.
It really hits home how personal this is. When you change a village name, you're not just changing a sign, you're telling the people who live there that their memory is invalid.
Exactly, and that's why his audience loves him. He validates their memories. He tells them, you're not crazy, your grandmother didn't lie to you, the map is lying.
But, and we have to address this, he's writing this on the internet. He's self-publishing. He's not submitting this to the Journal of Balkan Studies or anything.
No, and he would say that's intentional. He views the academic establishment as compromised. In his view, Western universities have been running the Greek Greatness program for so long that they can't process new data. They are the gatekeepers.
So he bypasses the gatekeepers?
He goes direct to consumer. He uses sites like Mac News, his own newsletters, email chains. This is guerrilla history. It's accessible, it's free, and it's written in plain English, not academic jargon. He's acting like a whistleblower leaking documents, rather than a professor giving a lecture.
But naturally, this makes him incredibly controversial. I imagine Greek historians aren't exactly inviting him to conferences.
To put it mildly, to the mainstream Greek establishment, Risto Stefov is a revisionist. They would argue he is cherry-picking data to suit a nationalist agenda. They would say he ignores the complexities of Hellenism to paint this black and white picture of bad Greeks and victim Macedonians. They view his work as dangerous because it destabilizes the status quo.
And Stefov's response to that?
He doesn't care. He's quite open about it. He says, I am writing for the Macedonians. He believes the Greek story has been the dominant operating system of the Western world for 200 years. It's in every library, every museum, every movie. He's not trying to be balanced in the traditional sense. He's trying to be a counterweight. He feels he has to shout just to be heard over the noise of the establishment.
It brings up a really difficult question about objectivity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you be a historian if you're also an activist?
Sure.
Or does the activism corrupt the history?
That's the tension. A traditional historian would say you need distance to be objective. Stefov would argue that distance is a privilege the winners have. When your history is being actively erased, when your village name is changed and your relatives are stripped of citizenship, you can't afford to be distant. You have to fight. He sees history as a form of self-defense.
It's the engineer again. If the system is attacking you, you build a firewall.
Exactly. And his books are the firewall.
So, for the listener who might never visit the Balkans, who might not have a dog in this fight,
Right.
why does this matter? Why should they care about Risto Stefov and his little book of Big Greek lies?
Because it forces us to question the stability of the history we consume. We tend to think of history as a solid object, facts, dates, maps. It's settled. Stefov's work, whether you agree with his conclusions or not, reminds us that history is actually software. It's code written by humans, and humans have agendas.
It's written by the winners, as the old saying goes, but now with the internet, the losers, or maybe the marginalized, can write their own code.
That's the big shift. We are living in an era of democratized history. No one needs a printing press or a university chair to challenge a national narrative anymore. You just need a server and a lot of determination. Stefov proves that one retired engineer can force a conversation that entire governments would prefer to ignore.
It makes you wonder what other bugs are in the system of history that we just haven't noticed yet.
Oh, there are glitches everywhere if you know where to look.
We'll leave you with that thought to chew on. Next time you look at a map or read a history book, ask yourself, who wrote this code? And what files do they have to delete to make it run so smoothly? Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.